I have Super Smash Bros. To thank for introducing me to a lot of different video game series. Earthbound, Metal Gear, Fire Emblem, F-Zero, Kirby, Metroid, and the topic of this video, Star Fox. However, this also meant that for the longest time, rather than associating the name Fox McCloud with Thunderbird Star Wars-inspired rail shooting, I associated that name with
Wombo combo!
That ain't Falco!
That ain't Falco!
Then comes along Too Many Games 2018, where I managed to snag an N64 along with 3 games: Smash Bros. 64, Donkey Kong 64, thank you Andy, and Star Fox 64, the title widely regarded as the best in the Star Fox series, and one of the best N64 games out there. If I'm starting with the series, might as well start out from the top. Over 20 years after its initial release, how does Nintendo's 64-bit space opera hold up? Well, I think it's time we found out. The story here is a relatively simple one. The evil scientist Andross was once upon a time working for the Cornerian army. After his experiments became more and more unhinged, however, General Pepper banished the mad scientist to the far-off wasteland of a planet called Venom. Sometime later, a team of mercenaries is sent out to investigate strange signals coming from the supposedly barren Venom. The team, Star Fox, is comprised of 3 pilots. The leader, James McCloud, Peppy Hare, James's wigman, and Figment Dengar, who winds up betraying the rest of the crew into the hands of Andross, leading to James's apparent death and a near escape for Peppy. Sometime later, Andross's army has declared war on the rest of the Lilat system. From their home base on Venom, have the rest of the planets on their knees. As the new Star Fox team, comprised of Slippy Toad, a returning Peppy, Falco Lombardi, and James's son Fox McCloud, it is your job to defeat Andross and restore peace to the Lilat system. With how detailed this setup is and how long the text scroll at the beginning of the game takes to set it all up, you'd think that this would be a pretty story-driven game. It's not. Each planet that you go to has small story elements of their own. Sector Z features the team attempting to keep missiles away from their mothership. At Cantina, we're introduced to Fox's old friend Bill. Fortuna features a fight with the rival mercenary group Starwolf, and so on. Each of these planets, though, are relatively self-contained in terms of overall story, with only a few exceptions. This leads to the story feeling very episodic in nature, like it's a season of a TV show or something, with each planet acting as a different syndicated episode. And with plot details such as Bill and a seeming rival for Falco Cat being brought up as if we're just supposed to know who they are without going into any detail about their origins, the episodic nature is driven even further home. Almost as if we're not only watching a serialized space opera, but we've only come in at some kind of midway point, like Star Wars Episode 4 or something. Honestly, I really like it. It gives the story a charm that not many other games can claim, and makes cheesy shots such as the crew literally flying off into the sunset at the end all the more endearing. Speaking of cheesy...
Can't let you do that, Star Fox. Cat, what are you doing here? Too bad Dad's not here to see you fail.
If I go down, I'm taking you with me.
This game's presentation is something else. The graphics were top of the line for the time, and I'd still say that they look good, all things considered, even though the N64's traditionally muddy textures haven't aged the best. Everything you need to pay attention to is bright and popping with color, and little details like the water getting swept up in Corneria are just the cherry on top to add to the experience. An experience that some would say I'm not getting the full extent of. Let me explain. One of the major selling points of Star Fox 64 was the Rumble Pack, an add-on for the N64 controller that would allow for controller vibration, a way of immersing the player in the action even further that has become commonplace in modern controllers. As you may have noticed, I do not have that hunk of vibrating plastic attached to my controller, so no hand massages for me. I'm not considering it that big of a loss, though. After all, a game shouldn't need a gimmick like that if it's, worth actually playing in the first place. But enough about that little tangent. I just thought I'd get it out of the way now, considering that the Rumble Pack is such a large part of Star Fox 64's history. Back to the game's presentation, though. More specifically, the voice acting. I love everything about it. It just oozes with cheese that wouldn't be out of place in a classic Star Trek episode. Everyone has one hokey line or another that they get to ham up their performance for, and it's truly a joy to listen to, again, adding to that charm of a serialized space opera. This charm is furthered by the over-the-top and bombastic military march-style music that they went for. It really drives home the sense of adventure through a warlike setting. Or at least the composition does. The orchestration, on the other hand, leaves a whole lot to be desired. The N64 sound capabilities weren't quite up to the task of this much brass and percussion at once, leaving the soundtrack feeling kind of watered down. I love themes like Star Wolf, Sector X, and Sector Y, but I also think that remixed versions featuring better instruments could do the songs way more justice. The result is an OST that just fades into the background of gameplay after all, which is a genuine shame. But there is the rub. This is a game, after all. How does the gameplay itself, the defining factor of a video game, hold up nearly 20 years after its release? The first thing that needs to be brought up is this three-pronged monstrosity of a controller and its notoriously fragile joystick. How does it hold up under the test of Star Fox 64? Surprisingly enough, pretty well. Now, admittedly, this is still a pretty fresh controller for me, so in a few months or so, the joystick may very well have snapped in two by then, but for this playthrough, it did its job and it did it well enough. The only issue was that after extended playtime, my thumb tended to reach the edges of the joystick and kinda slip off given how small the thumb pad was, which in some later fights was a death sentence. But how do you use this thing to control the finest space fighters in all the Lilac system? Well, first it depends what mode you're in. The majority of your playtime will be spent in the R-Wing. You operate on traditional flight controls, up is down, down is up, can shoot lasers with the A button, can fire screen nuking smart bombs with the B button, can somersault by pressing the left C button while holding the joystick down, and can
Do a barrel roll
by double tapping the Z trigger or R button. This is only in the rail shooter sections though, where the R-Wing is constantly moving forward. The game will frequently switch to all-range mode, taking the player off the rails and throwing them into a big open square arena where they have full control over their direction. The big difference here is that you have an added quick U-turn move to quickly reverse direction. But wait, there's more, for in this space epic about flying animals through space, you have the added bonus of tank and submarine missions. Woot! The Blue Marine controls like the R-Wing, except limited bombs are replaced by infinite light-up missiles, and the vehicle itself is slow as balls. And the Landmaster sacrifices good aiming for bumpy terrain, while making the barrel rolls clunkier and doing away with the somersault and U-turn for a dinky little hover. If you couldn't tell by now, I really don't think too highly of these other two vehicles. Granted, the R-Wing has its problems with the ship only being able to shoot where it's pointing and the controls for all range mode not really being tight enough for some of the crowd control they want you to do, but man, these other ones just suck, and the baffling part is that between the two of them, they only take up like 3 of the planets in the whole game. Yeah, there's only 1 stage for the Blue Marine and 2 stages for the Landmaster. Really makes you wonder why they even bothered putting in gameplay styles that were obviously just worse versions of the R-Wing. This thing I can sing praises to all day long. While the all-range mode feels a bit loose, during on-rail sections it feels tight and responsive. You're always in control. That is, of course, unless you lose one of your wings, which not only cuts down your mobility, it strips away your laser power-ups. That's right, you can power up your laser shots by collecting these green pickups. Fully powered blue lasers will devastate anything they cross, and it is glorious to watch even the toughest of bosses get torn through like tissue paper in your wake. That being said, it almost feels like some of the harder missions practically require some form of the powered-up laser in order to even stand a chance. Despite death meaning that your laser upgrades are stripped from you, however, in standard stages this isn't necessarily the worst, because the stage will always give you at least 1 upgrade before the boss. That is, with one exception. The Star Wolf fight on Venom is easily the cheapest boss in the game. Not only does it practically require you to have a good portion of your teammates alive, which is harder than it sounds, believe me, but because the fight is placed right at the beginning of the final stage, if you die, you don't get a chance to re-upgrade your weapons, leaving you at an objectively worse position that you can't get out of because your teammates are useless sacks of garbage that without their rivals will basically just fly in circles and twiddle their thumbs while you're being hounded down by 2 Star Wolf members who actually have this thing called coordination and strategy. Falco may claim to be on my side, but we all know he's lying through his big fat yellow beak if his actual usefulness is anything to go by. This doesn't make me feel like a badass, it just makes my teammates feel like jackasses. And this is one of the few times where they're even relatively useful. See, each teammate has a bonus to keeping them alive. Peppy will spout out hints as to how to face certain enemies, Falco will assist with hitting certain targets during the level, and Slippy will allow you to see a boss's health bar. The thing is, these bonuses really aren't all that helpful, making your team feel useless, which only gets more aggravating when they're begging and pleading you to get enemies off their tail only to fly in circles when you need their help. But see, here's where the game gets a bit interesting, because Star Fox 64 has branching pathways. That's right, despite the sprawling map of planets that you see in the Lilat system, you only play 7 stages in any given playthrough, and which ones you play are largely up to how you play each stage. In the majority of levels, there's an optional objective to complete alongside just finishing the level. Whether you complete these objectives or not will determine whether you go down the easy, medium, or hard pathways. And this isn't just a one-time thing either, as many times the pathways intersect with each other. Destroying the mothership on Katina will send you on the medium path, while failing to do so will boot you to the easy path. Defeating Starwolf on Fortuna will earn you a ticket on the medium pathway, while not defeating them in time keeps you on the easy path, and so on and so forth. The only level you need to play in order to get the good ending is Sector 6, which can be accessed through several means. As such, complaining about specific level requirements such as sector-wise cryptic hit requirement, or Zonus' searchlights, or Aquas's existence kind of feels superfluous, because to get the good ending, you don't really need to play them. Granted, they are needed to unlock Expert Mode, and they are where a part of Star Fox 64's replayability comes in. And regards to that aspect, being the replayability of this game, it both fails and succeeds. Let me explain. On one hand, the alternate and open pathways to the finish, medals for doing extra well in a stage, as well as the game saving high scores, really drives the player to find the level pathway that will gain them the highest kill count. On the other hand, despite the game keeping track of which planets you have and have not been to, there's no way to go back and play specific levels once you're done the game. Instead, you have to do an entire run-through of the game, which granted will only take you an hour or so to complete, but sometimes I just want to fight Starwolf without having to go through all this just to do it, and the game doesn't give you that option. At the end of the day though, those are just bells and whistles. Star Fox 64, even in its current form without having played the 3DS remake, is easily a game that I can recommend nowadays. It does have its flaws, and the learning curve of certain levels combined with the lack of a continue feature creates a bit of a rocky start for the first time player. But if you just push through that initial uphill battle, this is a game that will reward you with excellently tight gameplay wrapped up in a gloriously cheesy bow that'll bring a smile to your face. And I guess an alright multiplayer mode, I'll be honest, really haven't bothered with it. Star Fox 64 may not have aged like the finest of wine, but as an introduction to a series of games that I had never really paid attention to up until now, this has done wonders to make me a Star Fox fan. But that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe you could like, comment, or just enjoyed me that much, maybe even subscribe regardless of the outcome. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and hope to see you all again another time.